The sky was wrong. That was the first thing Commander Lena Veer noticed as the UNS Defiance pierced the thick cloud layers over the Indian Ocean. She had seen storms in low orbit over Venus, watched methane hurricanes roll over the terraformed plains of Titan. But this was something else. The clouds boiled like smoke in reverse, sucked upward toward an unseen point in the stratosphere, pulsing with flashes of violet and indigo lightning that struck with no sound. Beneath her, the ocean churned, not with rage, but purpose. The waves moved in formation, not chaos. They danced to a rhythm no human storm had ever followed. Sensors aboard the Defiance failed one after another. Radar fuzzed with static, sonar pinged back impossible readings, and gravitational meters fluctuated like the ship was passing through folds in space-time. AI cores flagged inconsistencies faster than they could correct them. Unstable local physics, one core offered before shutting itself down to prevent logic loop failure. The crew, elite, seasoned veterans of deep space combat, moved in silence, watching their instruments die one by one. And then they saw them. They broke. The surface with elegance and menace, riding the waves like apex predators, returning to a domain abandoned long ago. Alari leviathans, 50 meters long, bodies composed of a glossy obsidian-like material that rippled like muscle and armor simultaneously. Their forms shimmered with bioluminescent glyphs that pulsed in harmonic sequence, casting eerie reflections across the metallic hull of the Defiance. They had no eyes, no visible engines or propulsion, yet they moved with terrifying speed and precision, sliding between sea and air like the two mediums were the same to them. They weren't ships. They weren't animals. They were entities, somewhere between engineered organisms and natural disasters. One passed beneath the Defiance, and Lena felt the entire warship lurch upward as though lifted by a whale larger than any sea could contain. Earth's oceans had become a battleground. But only one side had come prepared. It began innocuously, as these things always do. A tremor in the Mariana Trench, a blip on the bathymetric scans that didn't match tectonic behavior. Then, silence. Deep-sea probes vanished. Comm lines to submarine bases in the Pacific went dead. Oceanic temperature sensors reported localized surges of 1700 Fahrenheit, hotter than the exhaust of a shuttle engine, rising from the deepest points of the ocean. Then came the voice, not transmitted by any known frequency, not heard through ears but felt, deep in the bones of those near the sea. Every naval operative, every deep-sea worker, every coastal dweller heard it simultaneously, in every language. A message not meant to communicate, but to declare we reclaim what your kind cannot survive. Humanity had spent centuries trying to master space, but in its ambition, it had overlooked its own oceans, leaving them half-mapped, under-defended, and misunderstood. Now that arrogance had come due, orbital platforms attempted to triangulate targets but failed. The Aelari didn't obey inertia. They didn't reflect signals properly. They were biological and yet impossible to scan. Antimatter torpedoes deployed by subaquatic drones never detonated. They simply disappeared, as though devoured mid-transit. For the first time in decades, Earth's military might met an enemy it could not measure, model, or match. It was during this mounting desperation that intelligence began circulating about a man. Not a naval commander, not a technologist, a fisherman. In a coastal village where technology still bent to the will of tradition, where satellite dishes rusted behind woven reed roofs, lived a man named Rano. No surname, no digital footprint. Local records called him Netwalker, a name passed down not by family but by deeds. They said he lived by the tide and spoke to it, that he never took more than the sea gave, that he knew when to disappear and when to appear, and always with a catch no one could explain. When the Aelari reached the Mozambique Channel and tore through the African naval blockade in under 9 minutes, only one vessel moved toward the B. Chaos. A wooden outrigger no longer than a city bus. Painted in patterns no one recognized, strung with dried kelp charms and shark teeth, it bore a single human aboard, weathered skin, white dreadlocked hair, eyes like iron smelted under pressure. Rano. The first visual capture showed him sailing straight into the vortex left by a dying Leviathan. No fear, no armor, just nets, woven from a fiber no one could identify, and bone harpoons scarred with something that might have been writing or warnings. What happened next rewrote every theory Earth scientists had about the Alari. 12 hours later, a Leviathan carcass still glowing faintly, leaking fluid that dissolved steel on contact, was found lashed to the side of Rano's boat like it had been dragged there. No scorch marks, no blast damage, just a clean puncture wound through the creature's head, made by something primitive. And deeply personal, the news broke the global net. Was it fake? AI-generated? No. Multiple nations confirmed the satellite images. Real-time footage showed the creature dead. The readings it emitted matched no known biology. It wasn't just slain, it had been hunted. And then, something unprecedented happened. The Alari changed course. They stopped advancing, skirted the coastline of Madagascar in silence. Leviathans that had torn through nuclear-powered destroyers began behaving like predators sensing an alpha in unknown territory. The waters around Rano's village became still. Birds returned. The temperature dropped. The ocean, as if remembering, its ancient tongue grew quiet. That was when Commander Veer, desperate and disobeying every intercontinental directive, took the Defiance into restricted waters. The crew protested. Her superiors threatened court-martial. But she knew nothing built in a lab was going to win this war. If there was any hope left for Earth's oceans, it rode in a canoe carved by hand. And now, floating in the shadow of this monstrous storm, her ship tossed like a toy against planetary forces beyond understanding. She saw him, Rano, sitting in the stern of his ancient boat, bare feet planted, eyes fixed on the horizon like he knew what was coming. He didn't acknowledge the ship, didn't wave. He simply held a coil of net in one hand, the other resting. On a harpoon that pulsed faintly in sync with the storm's lightning, she opened a channel, but there was no need. His voice came through, not through speakers, but inside her mind. You've brought metal to an old battle. You want to win? You must first listen. Before we jump into this epic tale, subscribe to StarBound's HFY for the most intense sci-fi battles, legendary warriors, and universe-shaking wars. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and join the fight, because what happened next would not just determine the fate of Earth's oceans, it would decide whether humanity truly deserved to claim its place among the stars. The Defiance held position just beyond the horizon line, its massive silhouette barely visible against the storm's relentless pulse. Lena Veer stood at the helm, staring out at the sea through the reinforced glass. The waves were no longer the chaotic force they had been before. Now they seemed to be kneeling, bowing before the strange figure in the canoe. The storm, still violent in its fury, seemed to avoid him entirely, crashing in jagged arcs on all sides but leaving the small boat untouched. It was an unsettling sight, a vision of a world turning itself over. She knew the theories, taught, in every war college, every interplanetary strategy meeting. The oceans were to be feared, Earth's greatest shield against cosmic invaders. But they had underestimated the deep, not just the sea's biology or its ecology, but something more, something the humans of old could never have fathomed. Rano wasn't a myth. He wasn't some environmentalist, some outlier of ancient beliefs. He wasn't even a fisherman in the traditional sense. He was the last of a long-forgotten breed, one whose ancestors had once lived with the sea in ways far beyond the reach of any modern technology. His ancestors had known it, had respected it, had learned the ancient languages of the deep. A language the Alari could understand, because their origin had been born not among the stars, but beneath the waves of a long-dead world. The discovery of the Alari's true nature had come too late for most. They were not invaders, conquerors in the traditional sense. They were survivors, beasts of incredible intelligence that had evolved in the crushing depths of a gas giant's oceans. Their entire biology was adapted to a world where pressure and gravity were weapons. Their ability to exist in Earth's oceans was not just a testament to their survival skills, It was a calculated move. They had come here not to explore, but to take what they could never rebuild, their world. Rano, however, had known them long before they appeared in Earth's waters. His family had passed down ancient knowledge from the time before space exploration, when Earth's oceans were seen as nothing more than resources. He knew their patterns, their weaknesses, and now, standing on the edge of human civilization, he had become humanity's only hope against an ancient species far older and more terrifying than any war machine built in orbit. Lena's eyes flickered back to the monitor. The moment she had made contact with Rano, the crew had scurried into action. The ship's engineers had attempted every countermeasure imaginable, scrambling to get their outdated oceanic systems online. They had the latest in AI-driven sonar, detection, deep-sea drills, anti-submarine technology, the best humanity had ever made. But when those systems were tested, when they tried to track the Leviathans, nothing worked. No sonar pings, no heat signatures, no gravitational anomalies, just empty sea. The Ailari were ghosts in water. Only Rano knew the key to this strange organic warfare. It was as if he had known this was coming, that his entire life had led to this moment. The sea, which had always been his ally, was now his battleground. Lena swallowed hard, trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. "How is this even possible?" she muttered to herself. "He's not even using modern tech. He's not even using weapons." The answer came from a soft voice behind her, one of her senior officers. "It's not about technology, Commander. It's about understanding. Rano, he's been living with the sea for so long he can speak to it. What we're seeing, what we're feeling, that's the same instinct that allowed ancient humans to outlive entire predators. A gut feeling, connection. But these creatures," Lena started. "They're not just creatures, ma'am," the officer interrupted. "They're a species, an ancient one, a war-born species, maybe even the last of their kind. And if Rano can truly talk to them, then maybe, just maybe, he's the one who can stop them." Lena was silent, staring out at the strange calm surrounding Rano's boat. How could a man, one fisherman with nothing but a harpoon, change the course of this war? It seemed impossible. And yet, when Rano turned his gaze toward her ship, she felt something shift in her chest, an energy, an ancient pull that only deepened the mystery. The storm above them began to twist, contorting into a column of light that spiraled upward into the black sky, leaving no trace of the sky's true form. It was as though the very heavens had opened, and through them poured something that felt more alive than any celestial body ever had a right to be. Rano raised a single hand, fingers stretched wide, reaching toward the light. The Leviathans moved as one, circling the man in the boat, the creatures so large now that their movement sent shockwaves through the water. At that moment, Lena felt it, a pull from the sea. The Defiance shifted ever so slightly in the water, a subtle tug, as if the ocean was trying to drag the entire warship into the depths. The feeling passed as quickly as it had come, but it left her breathless. Her comms buzzed to life. A message from Rano. This time it wasn't transmitted via any conventional system. There was no frequency to track, no code to break. It was a vibration in the air, a hum in her bones that conveyed his thoughts, his voice, but not his mouth. The words didn't form in her ears, but rather in her mind. The Ailari do not seek war. They seek to reclaim what was taken from them, and like any animal, they will protect their young. Lena's heart skipped a beat. The Leviathans. They had never attacked with intent to destroy. They were moving with purpose. Not to claim Earth, but to protect it from those who had no place here. Humanity had trespassed on their territory. The oceans were not a resource to exploit. They were sacred, a space that demanded respect. But mankind, in its arrogance, had assumed dominion over every corner of the Earth, including this final frontier. The words that followed cut through her thoughts like a blade. "You're out of time. The Ailari will not wait for you to learn. They will act." The transmission ended. Lena stood frozen for a moment. A strange heaviness settled into the pit of her stomach as she considered Rano's words. There was no more time for negotiation. The Ailari had made their move. The oceans were no longer humanity's domain. They were the Alaris, and they would defend them with a primal ferocity that no human weapon had been designed to face. She turned to her crew, a fire lighting within her chest. There would be no turning back now. The Defiance would have to fight, not with weapons or tech, but with understanding. They had to unlock the key to the deep, and they had to do it before the Alari decided that humanity wasn't worth protecting at all. The Defiance surged through the churning seas, its engines humming in quiet protest against the unimaginable depths below. The ship's hull groaned with the strain, the stress of its journey into the heart of Earth's most dangerous territory. This wasn't just an expedition, it was a desperate gambit, a race against time that had brought them to the edge of the unknown. Below them, the vast oceanic world stretched endlessly, concealing its secrets beneath layers of darkness and pressure. But it was no longer just a silent abyss. It had become a battlefield, its forces gathering, preparing for a conflict that no one had anticipated. Lena stood at the command deck, her eyes fixed on the monitors. The ship's sonar systems were now fully activated, pushing past their designed limits to try and pierce the impenetrable veil of water. But as before, nothing appeared. The Leviathans were there. She felt it in her bones. But the technology, the vast array of human ingenuity, was failing to detect them. The Aelari were not just masters of their environment, they had evolved to be the environment. The ocean wasn't merely their home, it was an extension of their very being. They were its heartbeat, its pulse, its shadow. The words Rano had sent, through the strange transmission replayed in Lena's mind. They will act. She couldn't shake the feeling that the war was no longer a matter of human forces versus alien invaders. It was a clash of existence itself. Mankind had been arrogant. It had overlooked the most fundamental rule of the universe. Every force, every ecosystem, every life form had its own balance. And humanity, in its quest for dominance, had disrupted that balance in ways they had yet to fully comprehend. Lena's gaze moved from the screens to the window, out to the storm-ridden horizon. The ship's artificial intelligence, the Helios, had been running simulations for hours now, trying to predict the Aelari's next move. But the results were as predictable as they were terrifying. They were already too late. The Leviathans had made their first strike, a subtle one, barely felt, by the humans aboard the ship, but devastating in its implications. The ocean was waking up. "We need to do something now," Lena muttered under her breath. "We need to see them. All we've got is Rano, and that's not enough." Her senior officer, Calais, stepped forward, his face grim. "Commander, we've already attempted everything we can. The Leviathans are not acting on conventional terms. We've detected no patterns, no strategic weaknesses, no power signatures, nothing. We're blind." Lena's fists clenched. She knew what Cale was saying, and it only made the truth that much harder to face. It wasn't just about hunting the Leviathans. It was about understanding them, understanding a species that had lived outside the reach of human comprehension for millennia. What made them tick? What were their goals? And what could humanity offer them, if anything, in exchange for their survival? She turned her attention to the control panel, bringing up a 3D map of the ocean floor. The design was crude, lacking. The finer details she knew the Aelari had. They had maps of every crevice, every trench, every hidden pocket of water. The Leviathans had lived in a world beyond the comprehension of human minds, where the boundaries of space and time were warped by the crushing force of water and the pull of an ancient gravity. Then it hit her. The answer was right in front of her. Not a map of the ocean, but a map of humanity. They had been fighting an invisible force, but they were ignoring the most basic concept of war: territory. The Aelari didn't just fight for resources. They fought for survival. And survival meant controlling their territory. The ocean was everything to them. Rano had told her that the Aelari were not conquerors but defenders. And what if the Aelari's true war wasn't just against humanity, but against the very idea of human expansion? What if the Aelari knew, deep down, that the moment humans took to the oceans, just as they had to the stars, would be the moment they lost control of their sacred home? Their fight was about reclaiming what had been taken, and they were willing to take every precaution to ensure that humanity would never disrupt the balance again. The realization was overwhelming. Rano's voice cut through her thoughts, not through any human technology, but again that strange gut-deep feeling. The hum of the sea echoed in her mind. They will come for the shore. They will come for your land. They will come for your cities. The message was clear. The Aelari were making their move. Lena's heart raced as she turned back to the monitors, her mind running through every scenario. If the Aelari attacked humanity's coastal cities, it would be impossible to stop them. The sheer scale of their aquatic might would crush entire naval fleets. There would be no way to defend the shores, no way to shield the vulnerable coastal populations. We need to get to Rano now, Lena said, her voice sharp with purpose. We need to understand this connection. We need to speak to the Aelari before it's too late. The order was given without hesitation. The crew, already prepared for action, scrambled to execute the directive. The Defiance began to alter course, heading toward the center of the ocean where Rano had positioned himself. The ship's engines groaned with a renewed sense of urgency as it moved, cutting through the storm with greater speed. But as they neared Rano's position, something changed. The water around them began to ripple, not with waves or currents, but with a deliberate, unnatural motion. It was as if the ocean itself was alive, responding to the ship's presence, pushing back against it. Lena's breath caught in her throat. As the realization hit, Rano wasn't just guiding the Aelari. He was part of their world, part of their ancient rhythm. And now the time had come to face the consequences of humanity's presence in the oceans. Helios, Lena ordered, her voice steady, prepare all non-essential systems for shutdown. We need to avoid detection at all costs. The AI complied, dimming the lights and reducing the noise of the ship's systems. The Defiance drifted into the eerie silence of the deep, like a lone vessel at the edge of an abyss that had already swallowed everything else. Lena stood by the window, staring into the depths, a gnawing fear twisting in her gut. The Leviathans were coming. They were no longer just a force of nature. They were an army, and no one had ever fought an army quite like this before. The ocean was alive. It wasn't the simple ebb and flow of water, the rhythmic pulse that humans had come to understand as the heartbeat of the planet. No, this was something deeper. The water, once thought to be an inanimate canvas for the world's largest creatures, was now a sentient force, rippling with intent. Lena could feel it, even inside the sterile confines of the Defiance. The air grew heavy with an otherworldly pressure, as though the ocean itself was aware of the ship's intrusion into its sacred realm. The Defiance crept closer to the spot where Rano had last transmitted. The sonar was a buzz of activity, but no physical entity was visible. Every scan, every sweep through the water, returned empty. But the unease in Lena's chest grew with each passing moment, as though an invisible hand was brushing against the very edges of the ship's hull. It was as though the ocean wasn't just resisting them, it was watching. A sudden jolt sent a wave of cold dread through Lena's spine. The lights flickered, a low hum reverberating through the hull. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke. There was no need. They all felt it, the presence of something ancient, something massive. The Leviathans were out there, moving beneath the surface like shadows that bent the laws of physics. Helios, Lena called, her voice steady despite the mounting tension. Any sign of movement? Negative, Commander. There is no conventional signal in range. However, the AI paused, the usually unflappable tone now laced with something akin to concern. There are anomalies, energy fluctuations. The ocean itself is resonating at frequencies I cannot identify. Lena's gaze snapped to the screens, her heart quickening. This wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't just a matter of missing data. It was an active manipulation of the environment. The Aelari, it seemed, were bending the very fabric of the water around them. They are a part of this world, Lena thought to herself. They are the ocean itself. The ship's hull groaned as another pulse of pressure passed through. This time, the vibrations were accompanied by a strange melodic sound, almost like a hum, but so deep it felt more like it was resonating in her bones rather than her ears. Lena's mind raced. What were the Aelari doing? Was this some form of communication. An attack. "Prepare for the unexpected," she ordered, her tone barely above a whisper. The crew complied quickly, as they all knew that the Aelari had the capacity to manipulate more than just their environment. If they could bend the ocean, they could bend the very laws of nature itself. Suddenly, the water around them exploded, in a violent surge, sending the Defiance lurching sideways. Crew members were thrown to the ground as alarms blared throughout the ship, the once quiet hum of the AI now drowned out by the frantic sounds of the vessel's systems scrambling to compensate. For a moment, everything was chaos, darkness, disorientation, and the sensation of being swallowed whole by an abyss that refused to relent. Lena staggered to her feet, gripping the nearest handrail to steady herself. Her heart raced. She could hear the sounds of distant thrusters, but they were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. These were not the roar of conventional jets or rockets. These were the sounds of a creature, a vast unearthly entity propelling itself through the water with force unimaginable. "Report," Lena demanded, her voice cutting through the cacophony. "Damage report. Minimal," Cale's voice came, through strained but calm. "But something's happening, Commander. The ship is not responding the way it should. We've lost stabilizers." Lena's eyes darted to the exterior cameras. What they saw confirmed her worst fear. Emerging from the depths vast and ungodly, the Leviathans began to surface, their enormous forms rising from the water like the primal titans of ancient myth. Their bodies were sleek and serpentine, glistening with bioluminescence. They were not like any marine creature humanity had ever studied. They were creatures of both flesh and water, alive in ways that transcended biology. Their movements were hypnotic, their sheer size more overwhelming than any fleet of warships could ever be. The Defiance rocked again, and this time, Lena knew they were under attack. The Leviathans moved with terrifying precision, their tendrils, long and muscular, lashed out, striking the ship's hull with incredible force. The ship groaned in protest, groaning as it was battered by the water's unnatural currents, and with every strike, Lena could see the ocean itself shifting, responding to the Leviathan's will. "We need to pull back," Cale said urgently, his voice tight with fear. But Lena didn't move. She was transfixed by the sight before her. These were not just creatures. They were the guardians of the deep, the silent rulers of a world that had never been meant to be touched. And now humanity had come to invade it. As the Leviathans encircled the Defiance, Lena finally understood the true depth of their power. It wasn't just physical. The Leviathans were telepathic. Their minds, connected to the water and the very energy of the planet, were broadcasting a signal that Lena could feel pressing against her own thoughts. It was as though the ocean itself had a voice, and it was speaking through the Leviathans. Suddenly her mind was flooded with an image, an ancient city, submerged beneath the ocean's surface. Its architecture was unlike anything known to mankind. Vast alien structures woven from coral and stone, pulsating with a dim, eerie glow. And in the center, a figure stood, Rano. He was one with the water now, his body twisted and elongated, his eyes glowing with the same bioluminescence that marked the Leviathans. He was not an envoy anymore. He was a part of them, their leader, their messenger. Lena's heart pounded in her chest. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. Rano had been changed, irrevocably. The Aelari had taken him, transformed him into something else. And now he was the bridge between their world and humanity's. They hadn't just wanted to defend their oceans, they wanted to erase the human presence entirely. "Helios," Lena whispered, her voice a mix of awe and fear. "Can you communicate with them?" The AI responded with a heavy silence, and then a single word, "No." The Leviathans began to close in, their massive forms blotting out the sky above. The ship was surrounded, and Lena knew there was only one option left. "We fight," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "We fight to survive." The crew nodded, their faces grim but resolute. Humanity had come to conquer the ocean, but now they would learn that the ocean had its own plans. The Leviathans had risen, and the battle for Earth's waters had only just begun. The battle was upon them. The Defiance shook violently as the Leviathans closed in, their massive forms dwarfing the ship as they circled it like predators toying with their prey. The ocean, once a symbol of life's rhythm and beauty, had become a war zone, its depths concealing more than just ancient secrets. It now harbored the terrifying fury of beings who existed beyond the reach of human comprehension. The crew, battered by the ship's violent movements, struggled to maintain their bearings as alarms blared in the background. "Brace for impact!" Lena shouted, her voice cutting through the din of the battle. "Helios, we need evasive maneuvers! Now!" The AI responded with a series of sharp beeps, the ship's systems grinding into action as it attempted to shift position. But it was clear that the Leviathans were far more agile than anything humanity had ever designed. Their massive, sleek bodies seemed to flow through the water with an ease that defied physics, their every movement powered by something beyond simple biological propulsion, something that tapped into the very energy of the planet itself. Lena gritted her teeth, her knuckles white as she gripped the control console. The Defiance could move at impressive speeds, but it was no match for the Leviathan's otherworldly grace. Every time the ship attempted to flee, another one of the creatures struck, sending waves of pressure through the vessel, rattling it. "From all sides, Commander." Cale's voice cut in, sharp with urgency. "We've got multiple breaches. The hull's integrity is failing." Lena's eyes darted to the status displays. Systems were failing across the board, shields were down, thrusters were malfunctioning, and every external camera feed was now blank, replaced by static. The ocean had swallowed them whole, and it wasn't going to let them go without a fight. But amidst the chaos there was something else, something that for just a moment stopped Lena's heart. A low hum, far deeper than anything a conventional engine could produce, began to pulse through the ship. It was faint at first, but then it grew louder, vibrating the very metal of the Defiance. It wasn't coming from the Leviathans, it was coming from the ocean itself. The hum grew, reverberating in the crew's bones, and suddenly Lena understood. The ocean wasn't just a battleground, it was an active participant in this conflict. The Aelari had done more than just protect their waters, they had embedded themselves within the very fabric of the planet's ecosystems. The Leviathans were their guardians, but the water itself was their weapon. "Helios, what is that?" Lena demanded, trying to ignore the overwhelming pressure building within her. "Chest, I can't analyze it," the AI responded, its usually calm voice tinged with an unfamiliar edge of panic. "This frequency is unlike anything we've encountered." Lena's mind raced. If the ocean was weaponized, if it could resist all human technology, how could they stand a chance? The Defiance was no slouch in terms of firepower, but this was an entirely new scale of warfare. The thought of calling for reinforcements from Earth felt absurd. The Aelari had been waiting for humanity to discover them, and now that the discovery had been made, they had responded with the wrath of the ages. A massive shadow loomed in front of them, the largest Leviathan, its sleek, glowing body pulsating. With bioluminescence, loomed just beyond the Defiance's viewports. Lena could see its massive tendrils, twisting like serpents in the depths, reaching out toward them with deliberate slowness, as though savoring the moment before the final strike. "This is it," Lena muttered to herself, her mind flashing. Back to the ocean's hum, the low resonating frequency that seemed to be calling to the Leviathans. She couldn't be sure what it was, but it was clear. The ocean itself was not merely resisting, they were being herded. "Prepare to engage in evasive maneuvers," Lena barked, her voice cracking with tension, but it was too late. The Leviathan, struck with the force of a tidal wave, slamming into the Defiance with such power that the ship groaned under the pressure. Sparks flew from the systems, and the entire vessel lurched to one side as the outer hull cracked open, splintering under the immense pressure. The crew scrambled to maintain control as another strike followed immediately, this time striking directly at the engine core. The Defiance shuddered violently, the hum in the air growing louder, more insistent, until Lena felt the sound vibrating in her very teeth. "This can't be happening," Cale muttered, staring at the monitor in disbelief. "They're tearing us apart." The weight of the situation pressed down on Lena. Earth's fleet, with all its firepower, had never encountered anything like this. It wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a fight against something ancient, a force that had waited in the shadows of the ocean for millennia. "Commander," Kale's voice broke through her thoughts, more urgent now. "If we don't break free now, we'll be destroyed." The water's shifting again, and this time, he paused as his eyes widened in horror. "They're closing off all our escape routes." Lena's gaze snapped to the viewports. The water around them had begun to move in unnatural patterns. Waves rose and fell without the usual laws of physics dictating their behavior. The very water itself seemed to have come alive, and it was closing in, trapping them. The Leviathans, sensing victory, were tightening their grip. "Helios," Lena demanded, her voice tight, "is there any way to fight back? Any weapon left on this ship that could hurt them?" The AI paused, its usually calm voice now tinged with uncertainty. "I've detected a small pocket of usable power from the ship's external disruptors. They may have a chance at damaging the Leviathan's outer scales, but the likelihood of success is minimal. The Leviathans are practically immune to conventional weaponry." Lena's mind raced. They were outmatched, but there had to be something the Leviathans hadn't accounted for. "Prepare the disruptors," she ordered. There was no other choice. As the crew scrambled to execute her command, Lena's eyes turned once again to the looming Leviathan outside, its glowing eyes watching her with a silent, knowing gaze. It wasn't fear she saw in those eyes. It was the certainty of victory. But that only fueled Lena's resolve. They had underestimated humanity once, and now Lena would make sure they knew. Earth doesn't surrender. It fights. The Defiance shuddered again, but this time there was something different, a spark of defiance.